To start right off the bat, would you be able to introduce yourself and kind of talk about, I guess, your career and how you kind of wound up at Z Network?
So me personally, I'm Alexandria, and I'm a member of the Z staff, which is currently a collective of 7 staff members that operates znetwork.org. My background was mostly in environmental activism, slowly leading into more of learning about systemic analysis and why in various activities I kept running up against the same issues time after time through all kind of different campaigns. And so I kind of stumbled into awareness of ZNet as it was known back then through learning from people like Noam Chomsky and other kind of big names that helped politically awaken lots of people. And during the pandemic, I also had a knee injury, and so I couldn't do anything. I had to sit on the couch for a couple of weeks, and I found this online course that Z was putting out where you could actually take a Zoom course with Noam Chomsky. And I signed up for it and thought that would be a great use of a couple of weeks of downtime. And through that process, I met Michael Albert, who's one of the co-founders of ZNet, and a few of the current Z staff members. And we, at that point, got together and started working on a relaunch of Z. And long story, but over a few year process, we completely relaunched and reinvigorated the site and kind of built how it exists today. So that's how I arrived into the project. And I did not come to it from any kind of formal media background. I think actually all of us who are currently on the Z staff are not formally trained media professionals. So we've kind of learned on the go. But I also think that's kind of part of why the site is different, in that we're able to do something different because we were never kind of trained in the ways that you're supposed to do media and education. So
What makes Z Network different? And can you kind of highlight, I guess you said how they're supposed to be, kind of what journalism or media is typically like versus how you guys do it?
Well, I think there's a lot of ways that Z is different. The first is we're independent media. So basically that just means we are supported by and therefore accountable to our audience, our community members. So we're 100% donor funded. And actually we're 100% small donor funded. We don't have any, big money backer who has any kind of decision-making influence over the site. So it means we're a shoestring budget operation, but it also means that the accountability to the readers is truly there because we're funded by you, we exist for you. And so none of the other kind of ulterior motives come into the picture when you're a for-profit operation or take advertisement from businesses or anything like that. So I think that that's the most basic way why Z is different, but there is a lot of independent media out there. So more specifically, I would say that what we try to do is be a participatory platform. So we have lots of venues for engagement from our community that you might not find in other media, even other independent media. So we have a Discord server where any member of the Z community can join and share content and talk directly with the Z staff and some of our contributors. We also have an advisory group that we call the Z Friends, who are kind of like our sounding board. Most of them are more well-known commentators, activists, and organizers. And so we are really blessed to have them involved and sending us their work to share with the community. But that's another way that kind of participatory nature comes out, because it's not just an advisory board that's there for optics and there's no interaction. Like, this is truly a group of very experienced organizers who's directly involved in a lot of what we do at Z. I think really our our politics that stem from our values. So if you look at znetwork.org, you will find a pretty broad diversity of thought and practice represented. But the thing that kind of ties it all together is that we come from a place of starting with values, and the fact that we're looking to change society for the better in how we select what content to disseminate. And I guess the last way that Z is really different is Z's brand, I guess, if you will, has always been and continues to be that we're trying to propose, not just oppose. So we really try to elevate and advance vision and strategy for a better world, not just critique everything that's wrong, but give people ideas and tools and dialogue opportunities to connect with each other, to advance that work that they're doing to pursue a better world.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I got from that brief little like cameo in manufacturing consent that the co-founders talk about, just adding the debates and information, but then also like what regular people can actually do to be involved, which was like, I think, really cool and appealing. And that's why I checked out the Z Network.
And I mean, it's even represented by who's currently operating the site. We're really a community of stewards. And I look at it as kind of like levels, well, not even levels, more like, broadening circles, where the staff who operates Z is, the core group that handles operations and day-to-day work and decisions and tries to push forward new things. And then you have the Z friends who are a little bit more tangentially involved, and then the wider Z community. And it's kind of a porous relationship. There's no barrier where just because you're not a recognized journalist or a seasoned activist or famous in any way, you can contribute. And we try and make that come across where people feel like this is a site for you and by you for your work.
From its origin, can you talk about why the co-founders kind of got together and what their ideas were and their vision and their mission? And I know this is like a long question, but how it's kind of changed through time, or stayed the same with just slight little adjustments?
Yeah, it's done both. It's done a lot of changing, and then there's some core things that have really stayed the same. And you're right, it's a bit of a long story because the Z project represents nearly 50 years of continuous work. So we kind of describe the origin as actually being in an independent press that was called South End Press in Boston in the 70s. And that was co-founded by two of Z's co-founders, Michael Albert and Lydia Sargent. And what they were trying to do is have a publishing house that not only published and disseminated radical left content, but also operated internally according to the principles that it proposed would be great for the world. So, equity, solidarity, self-management, diversity. And so they structured their operations in that way. And anyone who's worked in any kind of co-op or collective or like solidarity economy format knows that to operate in that way while we're surrounded by capitalism and neoliberalism and all these things, that it's not easy. So I think in trying to do that and doing that prefigurative work, they were able to attract a community of people who saw that they were really taking their values seriously and trying to implement that better future in today. So from that grew the original Z, which was Z Magazine. And I think that officially got started in the late 80s. It was really kind of one of the main, if not the main, radical left magazines in the US at that time. And it really kind of got famous and got a big following due to the contributions of some key contributors like Noam Chomsky. Bell Hooks, I think, got her start in Z Magazine. And there's a few people who are still very active contributing today, like Jeremy Brecher. Eventually Z Magazine, I think, went fully online in the mid 90s, which actually is pretty early for going online. That was kind of an effort to change the format with the times. And that was also still a time when the internet was looked at as kind of this radical and revolutionary opportunity where it was going to help decentralize the world and, create more equity and give people more voice. And in some ways it did, in some ways it didn't. But so Z, again, that continuity of trying to put our vision and our values in our practice, was very excited to be, one of the first online publications. Then again, as the decades rolled on, I guess that would bring us up to the relaunch in 2022, which I discussed a little bit. But basically, Michael Albert had been doing this for about 45 years. Sadly, his partner Lydia had passed on a few years previously, and he made the decision that it was time to get some new blood in the project. And so he basically just started writing an email out to lots of people that he knew that he thought might be interested. And we gathered in I think the original Zoom meeting was maybe like 30 people, just activists, organizers, journalists, students, teachers, workers of all kind who just had been interested in the project for various amounts of time. And Michael just asked, I'm looking at transitioning Z to new hands. And does anyone think this is a worthwhile endeavor? And if yes, what would, do you want to do something with it? So it was very open-ended. And through a process of about a year and a half, a core team came together and we totally relaunched the website. We have an archive of over 60,000 articles that we're adding to every single day. So it's just a tremendous resource for people interested in activism and in history, both US and international. It's kind of this giant record and resource of so much material. So that was a big lift to to redo that website, and it's still not perfect, but we're doing our best to keep on improving it and make it a joy to use and useful. Yeah, so that's kind of the short version of the long story, I guess you could say. And one other thing that I might mention is there was for many years something called Z Media Institute, ZMI, which before Zoom, people used to meet. I think they did it mostly in the summer, kind of like little camps where they would have educational seminars and workshops. And it would basically be a media literacy and organizing like educational camp. And a lot of people really benefited from their experience there. I was never able to participate. I didn't know about Z back then when it was happening. But what we're trying to do now post-pandemic is build that slowly back up. So we do host educational events. We're looking at relaunching a little bit more of a formalized online school. It's still in the process. So yeah, Z has changed. It's had many iterations. It's had many different people involved in its operations over the years. And really the central thing was just trying to practice the values that we want to see in society and to be a tool and a place of gathering for advancing vision and strategy, which is something that I think a lot of media tends to be afraid of. We do a lot of critique. History is really important, but we do a lot of looking back, and it takes something else to create a space where people feel encouraged and confident to start making positive proposals for what we do want, and then working towards it.
You talked a little bit about the other features the website has, like the online school that you guys are working on. Could you talk about some of the other things too? So
if you see our site, an easy way to navigate it, if you're on the homepage, is just look at the top menu bar. So on one side, we have all your normal like tools for searching for content in different categories. And then we also have a couple of other sections, one focused on education, where we actually have some really retro looking content from the Z Media Institute. When some of that stuff was first put online, it was kind of like a click-through experience where you could take these courses. And so if you look at it now, you'll definitely get the vibe that this is not created recently. We've preserved that. Eventually, we'd like to tidy it up and make it a little more modern in its user experience, but it's it might be fun for people as it is right now. So there's some free books in there. There's links to great videos that people can watch. We also have a vision and strategy landing page, which is kind of like a holistic summary of what a lot of the positive vision that Z has promoted over the years and continues to promote looks like. So there's everything from looking at the realm of kinship relations to community, to economics, to politics. And then there's a section on strategy. There's resources for activists. So you can spend a lot of time in there if you wanted to. And I mean, the site is huge. I recommend just clicking around and discovering what looks interesting to you. Like I mentioned, we also have a Discord server that's serving as our community forum, which people are sharing stuff and, you know, debating and sharing advice all the time. So that's great. And then another great way that people can get involved is you can subscribe to our mailing list for free. And that's a way that we reach out to the community to let you know about special events, other campaigns that we're endorsing, and just to stay in touch with everything that's going on. One thing that I should mention specifically about that is we actually just launched today a new campaign called the We Stand campaign. And it's a very succinct summary that proposes positive vision for developing unity among the left, among progressives, among really anyone who's kind of just like sick of all the madness that's been going on. So there's a very short, like couple sentences of critique followed by this kind of skeleton view of something that we think lots of people can get behind. So that's the start of sharing that out and seeing if we can create some momentum behind it and get people together using that.
I know you talked a little bit just about the online course. Are there any other like future master plans that you guys are like working on in your secret Zoom calls?
Lots.
Anything that you can share and not get in trouble?
Yeah. Well, so as far as doing online courses, what we're looking at right now, we have a lot of contributors and educators who have expressed interest in facilitating different courses and workshops. But where we're at right now is knowing that there's just so much out there already, and we're all living in this attention economy, and we're all strapped for time and energy as it is. So we're still just trying to organize that in the best way possible. So there's no master plan as yet for like a big educational program to launch, but what we are doing, which is another great reason to subscribe to the mailing list, is just starting off piece by piece. So we're having workshops, reading groups, educational events, and kind of testing and seeing what works best for people before we put something a little more formal and permanent together. So I would say just stay tuned and we'll let you know every time we have stuff. And another thing that I realized I forgot to mention, another component that we are running is the Z magazine is back. It's back in a digital format at this time. And that had lapsed for a while, but now I think it's been a little over a year since we've relaunched it. And it's really exciting because we're having all original content, including some content that has not yet been released on our website for each edition. And we have lots of plans for that coming up as well. I can't tell you the master plan is yet, but again, we want to make the magazine a tool for engagement in lots of different ways.
You briefly just said something about the madness of everything going on, which seems like it's every other day, maybe more too, if you pay attention to, I think, left-wing politics, because it's more than just like a US president, right? So you're seeing everything around the world at all times. And you also said something about the unity of progressives, because I think sometimes, at least it seems to me, when people are more politically aware and care about these things, like there can be a lot of division even in some of these progressive circles or conservative, whatever it is. But one issue I wanted to ask you about, especially because you're privy to like Noam Chomsky, is does Z Network have any maybe like issues where they're not on the same page? I know Chomsky, like in 2020, talked about endorsing like Biden sort of, just because he thought, another Trump presidency was a bigger threat, instead of going towards somebody like a Jill Stein or a Cornel West. And, maybe
Right.
it's division at Z Magazine, but I was just curious of your thoughts on that and what you kind of see in that discourse.
That's a really good question. And that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, for us as the editorial staff is how to navigate those differences in a way that encourages, building collective power, which does require some sense of unity, even when we disagree. Yeah, I mean, there's always contention over electoral politics. I think all of us at Z and most of us in the Z community perhaps would agree that most of our work and most of our vision for how to improve the world lies outside of electoral politics, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. So I think it was actually Chomsky who said something like, voting is not activism. It's not the end of the work. It's like one tiny piece of the work, and then the actual work starts outside of that. Another really contentious issue recently has been the war in Ukraine and a left response to that. There's always things that come up in terms of climate change and greenwashing and figuring out where the pitfalls are there. So as a media platform, how we feel our mandate and our responsibility looks like is to approach it in a kind of critical literacy type of way where we are not here to tell people what to think, especially not our community members. What we are here to do is to provide a diversity of opinions from credible sources that we think are well-reasoned, constructive, well-evidenced, and then trust our audience to think for themselves and to have that debate. So we actually want to be encouraging good faith debate among left circles and even outside of those circles to further what we can do to pursue the change that we want to see. I also don't want to make it seem like we don't take a stand on certain issues or we'll just publish anything, because I think a lot of mainstream media tends to do that where they're like, well, we want to show both sides. And all that does is kind of move the realm of the acceptable or the Overton window in normally not good directions. So like you can see a lot of rightward shifts in media coverage because people are doing this both sides thing. So how we kind of approach it is, again, we're very serious about our values and our vision for what a better world would look like. And we start from there and then try and open up the space for all the perspectives that we feel deserve to be heard and would be constructive. We don't always get it right 100% of the time. And there's even between the seven of us who are currently making the editorial decisions, we don't all always agree. And I actually think that's a good thing, because if you look at Z on any given day of the week, to me, you can kind of tell that there's multiple hands in this. It's not just one voice. So yeah, it's not easy. But I think that our appetite and our skill for debate is something we actually need to work on. We need to, in general, humans in general these days need to work on their communication skills. And that doesn't mean just making sure everyone's always happy and getting along, but it means not being afraid to defend your position and to even change your mind. That's not shameful or bad. That's how we progress, and that's how we achieve the things that we want.
What's some of like the pushback and criticism that you guys get, whether it's from the other side or mainstream media or even your own, the more left-wing politics?
We definitely get from time to time people sending in or contacting us with strong reactions to some content that we've disseminated or position that we've taken. And sometimes it's constructive and helpful, but a lot of times, I think everyone's experienced this because we're all a little bit in media. If you participate in social media, where there's just this tendency to, if you care deeply about something, you can lash out. So we do experience that. Luckily, I don't think it's very much. But again, if you're working in any kind of media or like public facing thing and you're trying to interact online with strangers and there's no real relationship there, that you just need to have thick skin and realize like people are fried. This reaction, a lot of times when it comes from our community members, I tend to think we're a group of people so committed to social change and we all care so deeply that if you feel like something's been gotten wrong or just not what you wanted, then emotions run high. So that does happen. And we still are happy to have people send us their feedback. A lot of times it is helpful. As far as the other side, it's interesting. I think the biggest problem, in my opinion, is if you have sides or if you have bubbles, if you're ignored by them, like if you never hear from anyone who thinks differently from you, and maybe even gets pissed off by your position, then that's not necessarily a good thing. So I actually like when we get engagement and I can tell that this person just has a totally different perspective from me. And a lot of times it's not necessarily that we have a disagreement over values or a big disagreement over anything substantial. We're actually operating from a place of understanding how the world works completely differently. And as a media platform, that's an opportunity to open the door. So I think a lot of like the confrontational, I don't know, maybe it's kind of like a YouTube culture of like slamming people is not always the best move. It definitely gets the clicks and might be entertaining, but for us, the pushback from the other side or other circles is an opportunity. Doesn't always work, and you can't spend hours convincing everybody of everything, but you can at least give people a chance to check out a different way of looking at something, make them feel invited. One strategy that we've been pursuing for the last couple of years is kind of trying to drop in behind the lines or like outside of the normal left eco bubbles by having our content listed on the major news aggregators. We have a very talented staff member who was able to push this through. He's very technically inclined. I still don't know how they accepted us, but all of our content appears on MSN, Smart News, Google News, Flipboard, and we're working on some others. And I think in total, that represents a potential audience of like over 700 million people. And most of those people only ever see mainstream news. So to put ZNet content in front of them, we get a lot of messed up comments and we get a lot of pushback. But at the same time, I think giving people the opportunity to see content that they've never been able to see, the people with the power and the money who own the corporate news and media sources, or even independent media, which is backed by big money, they don't want people to have that chance to see this different perspective. So we're kind of seeking that pushback. Yeah, I don't think that, at least not in my relatively short involvement over the past few years with Z, that we've had any major pushback in a more organized way, like no organization or anything like that has ever come after us. I know there are stories. If you sit down with Michael Albert, he'll tell you about all kind of different things, from like IRS pressure to different things that happened over the years. But other than the normal things like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter shadow banning and stuff like that, which that's expected these days if you mention the word Palestine in your posts. But yeah, so far so good for me. I'm sure if I keep up with this, I will experience something a little more extreme. I'm not looking forward to the potential of a second Trump administration with the Project 2025's discourse on how it views independent and left media. But yeah, we'll see. Could get interesting.
Yeah, I would like some boring stuff for a while, but I know what you mean. It's
Yes.
very interesting every day. It's exhausting. Looking back through its history, like you said, almost 50 years, what are some of like the biggest accomplishments?
Well, the first being that it still exists. It's always been a donor funded kind of string operation. So that I think is an accomplishment. I think if I look way back, just the fact that the project was mentioned in, I think you mentioned manufacturing consent, and some of the most effective educators and organizers and activist campaigners in my living memory, and before my time, the people that I looked up to, had a lot of them had some connection to Z over the years and really viewed it as kind of a North Star to bring a diverse community, but a committed and kind of values aligned community of people together. Over the years, that I think the community that has been and continues to be is a big achievement. And I think looking forward, again, like the community that is involved in this project is really my reason for giving so much of my time and energy, and to me feels like the biggest win over the years, because when things are so crazy and we're all struggling and exhausted doing our own things, just community is really like the biggest support, the reason to keep on doing it, the thing to fall back on, and the thing to then get up and do the work for. And Z really is kind of a movement home for a lot of different people. So like we'll get asks, I'm hosting this event or I'm doing this campaign, can you connect me to so and so, or can you share with the community this? And to be in a position to say yes and to help people in that way, to me is like it's a huge honor, and as an activist, just something that I get such a thrill out of, being able to help give voice to all the different efforts that go on, because that doesn't get enough coverage. I think we're inundated with the bad news, and there is a lot of bad news, but if we can give voice to the many, many, many people out there who are really giving their all in very different ways to make things better, that I think is, to be able to do that is an achievement in itself.
You had said there's other connections. Are there other like resources like your own that you would recommend to regular people?
Well, as an educator, you probably already know about this, but I've been digging through the Zin Education Project. I think it's .org. That has some amazing, amazing tools. As far as a source of just like a daily snapshot of the news, because Z is not exactly a news site. It's more like analysis and the deeper dives. But for the news, I really like Democracy Now. There's a lot of other sites out there that do an amazing job, and I could list a whole bunch, but I kind of default to recommending that when people ask for an easy, accessible resource, because I think you don't need to have any kind of political background or be any kind of scholar or activist, and you can get a daily snapshot of US and world news, and they do a much better job than any of the mainstream platforms out there. My biggest recommendation is to do what you can where you are. So if there are any groups in your community that you think are doing cool work, even if it's not like everything that you care about and want to be done, if there's a group of people doing something, link up with them, and that will lead to more and more things. That's kind of how I got my start in activism way back, and how I continue to evolve, especially in my focus on climate activism. That kind of default to just looking for network and looking for a community has served me really, really well. So it's not like a resource, like a website you can go to, but it's almost like a mode of operating, to just seek out connections and learn about what other people are doing. And that will lead to more. It will like unfold your way for you.
My last three questions are more for like me to like clip up and make a collage. Why is history important?
I think that history is important because if you've never been allowed to understand all the huge diversity of what has been, in all the continued struggle of humans to pursue liberation, then you can much more easily be limited in what you can imagine for the future. So I actually don't think that the most important component of history is to always get it exactly right or to know the most about everything. But I do think that it is important that lots of people are interested in studying history so that we can create that opportunity to imagine a better now and a better future. Because when you have this dangerous scenario of a few people controlling what we define as history or limiting the history we're allowed to know about, that's really, really dangerous and limiting for what can be. So I would say that, just history is important and it needs to be important for more people.
What would you say is one or a few of the biggest misconceptions in media and journalism?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions, and this really was illuminated to me through experience, is that there are people who just know everything or who are always right or who can make up your mind for you, and you should just listen to them and take that whatever they say without any kind of critical lens or your own questions. Because actually, you realize once you get on the other side of the microphone or the camera or the pen that we're all just people. And yes, people have, different levels of education, and I'm not taking away the value of expertise and people working really, really hard to know a lot about certain things. Or even certain people just to have a really good way of presenting ideas or a logic that really works for you. But what is a misconception is that that means that not everyone can make up their own mind. So media kind of exists today to make up people's minds for them and to constrain the acceptable and to define reality for a lot of people. And that serves a very few people. And that's not really how it should be, and it doesn't have to be. It should be it should be a way for people to share information and then make up our own minds.
What is your advice to people that go on to study anything related to social studies, whether it is history or journalism?
I would say to pursue, because I really think that a greater diversity in what we focus on and what gets visibility is a very, very good thing for society. So whether it's history, social studies, journalism, learn about the things that interest you because you'll be able to sustain that. That's something obviously that resonates with you, and that actually will be the best way to better the world through your studies and through your work.